Hello Zwifters, and welcome to another Zwift Racing League Recon. Today I'm going to be reconning race 4 of the 2023 to 2024 season 2 or round 2, and this is going to be 2 laps of Suki's playground. So it's going to be a pretty rolling course, and it is a scratch race, which means there are no points available. However, this still should be a very exciting and fun race with lots of places for attacks and some great power-ups in play. Let's dive into the details. Alright, so as I said, it is going to be 2 laps of Suki's playground, which is going to be 22.9 miles or 36.8 kilometers, and there's going to be 980 feet of elevation gain or 299 meters. And it's going to be the same across all categories, so one category is not going to be racing more than another. And then the 3 power-ups in play are going to be the feather boost, the draft boost, and the arrow boost. So 3 solid power-ups that I think are going to make this a very interesting race. Let's get into the bike choice. Alright, so bike choice. The best bike for this course is going to be the most aerodynamic frame and wheel set that you have. So for a lot of you, that's going to be the Venge S-Works and the DT Swiss disc wheel set, because overall it is pretty flat for the vast majority of the race. There aren't too many hills, and for the hills, they are not too big and not too long, so it's not going to be enough to make an all-arounder a better choice on this course. Now on to the recon. Alright, so taking a look at the start of the course, it does start on a pretty small downhill, but if you are a lighter rider, you do want to make sure that you are holding on tight with solid positioning in the group. Otherwise, you might find yourself off the back and using unnecessary energy. So I'd say just keep it pretty steady at the start. Don't go out too hard, and you don't need to be on the front pushing the pace or anything, because that is not really going to do anything in the start of the race, especially when it is a slight descent. You'll continue on to do some flat parts with some small gradients of around 1 to 2%, and also some small descents of around -1 to -2%, but overall it's not going to be anything that is going to create separation or give incentive to create breakaways or any attacks like that. It is going to be pretty calm, I'd say, for the first couple of miles of the race while riders do start to settle in. Alright, so for this next flat section here, the best thing you can do for yourself is to just stay in that draft and save as much power as possible. However, if you are a top category A rider or top category B rider, and your team is feeling especially strong on the day, you could try and attack here, because riders won't be expecting it and riders will just be settling in. And this is going to be a better place than the climbs, because on the climbs, everyone's expecting attacks and the pace is already going to be so high that it's going to be hard to really make a gap. So when you see the KOM markers, don't be too afraid, because you really won't be going up the whole climb, just 2 sections of it. Let's move on to the climb now. Alright, so right here you're going to make a right hand turn onto this climb, and that is the wooden bridge I'm talking about. This is where riders are going to start cranking the pedals, and this is where you want to be alert and staying towards the front of the group. And I really want to stress that, because if you are contending for the win here, you don't want to be off the back this early on, and know that riders are going to be traveling through this section at pretty high speeds. So you want to stay towards the front of the group and really just be ready to react to any hard attacks that do come your way, because riders are not going to slow down at all on this pitch, and riders are going to be pushing really hard trying to make a split in the group. And certainly some riders are going to be getting dropped in this earlier section, but there is a flatter section, and I expect the pace to still be pretty high here, with lots of riders coming through the group as they are catching up and just passing through the group, which is going to cause a bit of chaos. But just expect that for this section of the course, and know that it will settle down around here, but it will come back up once you hit the next climb. One quick interruption. If you do want to know how to win your next Zwift race, please smash that subscribe button. It really does help support the channel, and my goal is to hit 1,100 subscribers by the end of the year. So please help me make that goal possible by just hitting that subscribe button. And yeah, that's it. Let's continue on with the recon. Alright, so this next part that you are seeing, I consider it the second part of the climb. What you saw earlier was part 1, and this is where the pain sort of continues. However, unlike that really big burst that you saw earlier with 8% gradients, this is going to be more of a slow and steady one, but expect riders to be pushing well above threshold power and really putting power on the front of the group to try to cause some separation, because this is at the point where the group is still strung out, and if you are able to push here and really make a break, you can drop probably half the group on this section. However, if you do get dropped, know that you can still catch up here, because their groups aren't going to be going extremely fast on this gradient, but once they do hit the flatter parts, that's going to be a lot tougher to catch as a smaller group off the back. Now you can see here, gradient continues to hover around 3 to 4 to 5%, and it mostly stays steady, so I wouldn't worry too much about this gradient if you are a climber, and this should be pretty light for the climbers out there. But for the other riders who are trying to make it to the sprint finish, I'd recommend just using whatever power you need in order to stick with this group here, because it's an extremely crucial part of the course, and I feel like this is one of the pinnacle moments of the course where you don't want to get dropped. Otherwise, you're going to be out of contention for the rest of the race. Alright, so that part is pretty much the hardest part of the course, I'd say, for most of the riders, and this next part is just a really good opportunity to sit in the draft and let other riders do the work while you just chill down this descent and just do whatever it takes to stay with the group. And for most of you, it's not going to take a lot, and you're going to be well below threshold power, allowing yourself to really get some solid recovery. However, if there is a group behind you trying to chase and catch up, you may want to try to put some pressure on the front and work together with some teammates in order to make sure that that group does not come back together if you are trying to separate the group, and make it a bit easier to win that finishing sprint. Alright, so when you see those bridges that cross between the fishing villages, you really know that it is almost the end of the descent, and you can start to gear up for a bit more action, as riders are now pretty much recovered from those pretty grueling climbs at the start. And as you go through this village, just know that there isn't going to be much descent left in the course, and it only goes up from here. Alright, so here you can see that there is a small sprint segment here, and I'd like to talk a bit about power-up strategy. So a lot of riders are going to use their power-ups in this section, mostly because they have a power-up that isn't ideal for the finishing sprint. And if you do have a power-up that you don't really like for the finishing sprint, like a featherweight boost, I'd recommend using it here and taking your chances to try to snag a better power-up. And the best power-up for the finishing sprint is going to be that javelin boost or that arrow boost. Arrow boost is going to be the best, as usual, in these fast sprint finishes. Now, heading back to this area where you do see that those little KOM markers, just know that it is time to start cranking it up again, and things are about to get really chaotic here, especially if this is the last lap. This is where the group has sort of come together, and you are now with the final riders who are in contention for that win. So riders are going to try to push the pace and separate that group so that there are less and less riders contending for the race win. Now you can see here, as you move up here, it's going to be 3 to 4% gradient for most of this section, which is going to be just enough to get riders to accelerate, but not quite enough for those really high numbers that can go into the orange or orange numbers on your right hand rider screen. So just watch out for those orange numbers, because if you're seeing them here, that means that someone is likely trying to make a split and attack. Alright, so now this is the bridge. This is the bridge that I talked to you guys about earlier, and you really want to keep your eyes out from here on out to the finish, because I can really see the race going two ways here. Riders crank it really hard on this section and end up holding it all the way until the finish, or once you get to the top of the climb, riders start to play a game of cat and mouse. Those are really the two scenarios that I can see in this last part, and riders can certainly break away on this last final climb if they have the power and the legs fresh enough to do so. And I'd recommend putting out all the power you have left just to try to stay with the group. And if you are feeling really comfortable, I'd recommend sitting in, especially if you have a strong sprint. I've won a race on this course with this exact finish, and I was actually in a breakaway as we came over the top of the climb, but that really only happened because we were in a small group. So if you do have a really small group of riders, I think a breakaway could certainly work here, and you just got to make sure you are pushing enough so you have around a 10-second gap at around this point in the course. But if you do have a large group coming down this descent, you're probably not going to be able to stay away, because the draft of a large group is just so much more powerful than that of a small group. In my racing experience, this hasn't really been a course where riders went long, but that certainly is always a possibility. However, it's not as probable because this is a descent finish, which is going to make speeds a lot higher and a lot harder to sustain over time if you are a solo rider racing against a big group. So I'd recommend going around here, and this is where this is going to be just all out for the finish. And if you can get a solid slingshot from the group, you can hit some really high speeds, and that will allow you to get to the front of the group. but please make sure that you are not in the back of the group when the group starts sprinting. Otherwise, you are going to be left in the dust because the speeds are just going to be so high that it's going to be hard to make up a lot of places. So I'd recommend starting your sprint from around the middle of the group. Don't be right at the front, but be sort of in that middle sweet spot. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like, subscribe button, and with that, see you all next time and ride on. Best of luck, Zwifters.